Welcome to Crossing Barriers, Building Friendships, a podcast of Peace Lutheran Church. My guest today is Mandy Giffin, and she is the proprietor of Gully Farms, and they also have a food forest. She is in the middle of nowhere in this beautiful setting, so her internet is sometimes a little bit iffy. But anyway, welcome, Mandy. We're glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
The main point of our conversation today is going to be about bees. So tell me, how did you get started being a beekeeper?
Well, it's actually funny. I got a hive for a Christmas present from John. And I had never thought about being a beekeeper until he got me that present. And then I just started doing research, just kept trying, basically, because you're not always successful the first round.
So how many hives do you have?
Before winter, including the one that I watch at Peace, I had 5 hives that I was taking care of. Then before Christmas, one of my hives did not make it, so I'm down to 4.
Peace Lutheran Church now has a hive of bees there. And I remember you sending me a picture when you actually transported the hive of bees in your car. That must have been a scary thing to do.
The first time was scary that I ever did that. I just kept picturing all the bees flying around my car. But we, I just make sure I'm suited up. And if a bee gets loose, just kind of hope and pray that it stays near the hive. But we just tape up the hives really well so nobody escapes. And they usually at this point were pretty adamant about being around the queen. So the only ones that will fly out is if something happened to the hive during transport or if somebody flew in the car before I shut the door.
So when we were talking about having bees at Peace Lutheran Church, you made the comment that having hives is more heartbreaking than it is rewarding. So what are the problems that can happen to a hive?
So that statement was based on, I have been keeping bees for about 6 years, and up until last year, I had not gotten any honey. So now that I've had a year of honey, it is very rewarding to have the bees. The heartbreaking part is we are now in a climate where bees are struggling to survive. And each year it seems that more and more beekeepers are losing their hives. There is a beekeeper that had 40 hives down the street, and I think now he's down to 3. And but that's over a course of years. With the Varroa Mites that have come in, the hive beetles, there's different funguses that can come, people using pesticides. The problem with the pesticides is people don't understand exactly how that works. If you spray, say, Roundup on top of the flower petals, they will go and pollinate those flower petals, get some of that like Roundup or spray or whatever from the pollen, bring it back to the colony, and then spread it out to everyone. Whereas, so there is a good way of using pesticides is, down at the base or isolated locations where it won't get on the pollen that the bees will definitely, will be taking back to the hive. So then that can cause the hives to just completely have colony collapse or die.
What was that first thing you said?
Oh, Varroa Mites.
What's that?
Yeah, those are mites that pretty much any beekeeper is going to have an issue with Varroa mites at some point. They're these little mites that actually go into the larvae and attach themselves to the larvae before they hatch, and then they kind of grow with the bee. And you can see there are some pictures online, but you can see where a bee will have a Varroa mite just kind of stuck under their shell, and it just feeds off of the bees, and it can cause the babies to not fully develop, and they have kind of like I guess you would be like a disability, like only half of it develops, and then they're sickly, and then it can spread, weaken the hive, and then they're more susceptible to all the other pests and the moths and all the weaken the hive. So
So do you
they're
have a
not
way of
sustainable.
treating for those mites?
Yes, there is Varroa mite strips that you would feed the bees, and it's kind of like medicine, and then they would take it and it would kill the Varroa mites, but you cannot harvest honey from those while they're being treated, because then the honey would have those chemicals in it. But some people, my actual bee mentor, she actually does not treat for the Varroa mites. She believes that if the hive is strong, healthy enough, you take care of it, that they will fight them off. And so she has never treated them. I have yet to treat, but I have noticed one of my hives over the winter has Varroa mites. So I'm waiting for the temperature to get above freezing for a long enough period of time where I can treat them, and I know that they're strong enough to take the medicine.
What is the important role that bees play in our plant and food cycle?
Well, and bees are just one pollinator. There's many pollinators that are very important. The bees are just the ones I guess people know the most about. They help plants produce fruit. When they pollinate through pollination, if they go to one flower, then they go to another flower, and then another flower, they're spreading the pollen. So they're able to, it's kind of like the male and female parts will then produce, your bell peppers or your tomatoes or and honeybees don't always pollinate the same things that other pollinators do. So you kind of need all the pollinators to work together. But without that pollination, plants would not produce any fruit. They would just produce flowers.
Do bees prefer a certain color of flower over other colors?
Well, bees don't see the colors in the same way we do. I think I don't know 100% what colors they're most attracted to, but I know a lot of the whites can be, from their perspective, they're reflected as purples. I'd have to look more into my books about those details, but yes, they prefer certain flowers and certain colors to others, but I'm not sure 100% of that information.
So talk to us about the hive at Peace Lutheran Church. How is it doing?
So right now we're in I call it the knocking phase. So I don't disturb them during the winter. So I'll just drive by there and just knock on it and make sure I hear the humming, and then leave them alone. But so they're humming, so they're there. But right now they're just in their hibernation stage where they were really strong when I closed them up for the winter back in the fall, and they had, honey super. I left them extra honey to kind of feed on throughout the winter. So far they're doing really good. And it's a hive that comes from my bee mentor. So she cares very strongly about, she knows exactly where all of her bees came. And these bees originally came from a really dear friend of hers. So she calls it her OG hive. This was her original part. The queen is from the original hive. So they're strong bees. And so far they look like they're doing great.
I'm excited about that because I had kind of prepared myself for the worst, that we would get the hive set up and that it would be heartbreaking, but that it's gone so well our first time is just really exciting. Will they swarm this spring, and will we have a chance to kind of catch a second hive or second colony? I'm not sure I'm using the right words.
Well, we're not out of the woods yet, so hopefully they will survive the winter. Still, depending on, because as they hibernate, what they do is they go into a ball, and they usually have the older ones on the outside, and then they have the younger ones on the inside, and the queen's in the middle. And so throughout the winter, the ones on the outside will just die, and they just kind of so hopefully we'll have enough. If there was thousands of bees in there, then we'll be good. And hopefully that the winter doesn't shock them. But so the swarming, it just depends on how they do during the winter. Like 2 years ago, I had one hive that had probably 10 queen cells in it, and it swarmed constantly. So, but then I have other hives that never swarm at all. So I will know more in the spring inspection. But if they do swarm, we do not want we don't want that swarm at peace, or at least near the other hive, because they produce that same pheromones the queen does, so that they might just go back to the original hive.
Oh,
So what I was thinking, I would take some of my bees here if they swarm and bring it to peace, and then bring the peace leaves, if they swarm, peace bees here. Does that make sense? So then you have
yeah,
two.
yeah. Yeah, I thought there was an issue with actually getting the boxes for the hives. Has that been a problem?
As far as, well, I mean, with all the shipping and wood and all that, that's what was hard. But I think that has all kind of started settling down. I've started to see more hives for sale online. So I think that should be, it's just a matter of keeping up with the equipment.
Do we need to purchase another hive for peace?
Probably. I say yes, but that, that we can't guarantee that we're gonna get another swarm or get some more bees. But it's always, I've caught myself many times having a swarm and then no equipment to put the swarm in, so you just kind of have to watch them fly away. So
yeah, that's not good. Yeah. If we get to harvest honey, what would be the timeline for that? When would that happen?
So there's different types of honey. So the early spring honey, we would probably harvest maybe end of May, early June. And that's usually the clearer, lighter colored honey. It's sweet, tastes like flowers. Then there's the summer honey you can harvest a second time around August. And that's going to be the more darker amber honey. And it's all based on what is blooming at the time that you harvest the honey. I would say either June and then August. If in August would be only if they have a lot of extra honey.
Okay.
You don't want to deplete them too much before fall.
So our rummage sale is the second weekend in June, and we have a lot of people that come to that. And I just thought it would be real cool if we could have some honey there to sell our second weekend in June.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we could. Last year, I think my first harvest that I did was at the end of May. And then I harvested again around end of July. It all depends on the Mother Nature, when's our last frost and when did the flowers bloom. So, but if everything goes well, we should be able to at the end of May. I'll know more. I'll get into them probably at the end of April. I'll check them out and go through the box and just see. And so what I do next is I'll switch the boxes. So right now you have the brooder box, and then you have the top super, and I'll switch them. So they will, because they're going to be up at the top box. And so I'll switch them to the bottom and then bring the brooder up, and then put new frames in there for them to build comb and put honey in.
So what equipment do we need to get ready for spring and harvesting honey?
We'll need a whole nother hive. Oh, the harvesting equipment or the hive?
Both.
Well, the harvesting equipment, I have a extractor. It's a hand crank extractor that I use, but they have automatic ones that you can, plug in that go a lot faster. But in a bucket, so you would have the extractor, you extract the honey, and then, but it drains into a bucket, a honey bucket. It's a white bucket, so we would need a bucket, the extractor, and then you need the honey strainer that catches all of the any wax or honeycomb that falls out, and then and then you can just pour the honey straight from the that white bucket
into jars. So we need to get jars.
We would need, yes, and glass jars are best or better than plastic, just for quality purposes.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is we at Peace need to get a new hive. We need to get new frames and probably glass jars and maybe labels.
And I print mine from our house. So, or you can order them online and just get, we could do Peace Bees.
Sure.
Just have a label from, yeah.
Well, there is a pastor friend who has bees in Franklin, And so if you need another place to kind of, if you swarm, we'll swap out, swarming hives of bees. I can hook you up with Julian Gordy because I'm sure he would love to do that too. I think he was in the same
Oh,
situation where
awesome.
his bees swarmed and he wasn't there to. He used the word catch them.
Yeah, it's a fun process catching a swarm. I was first scared, but they're really calm when they're swarming. So you can just kind of just scoop them. And it's really cool because if you find the queen and put her in where you're wanting the hive to go, they'll just march right into the hive
Wow.
just to be near
Wow.
her. Yeah.
That's wonderful. So talk to me a little bit about the communalness of bees and how they do their hives and stuff. I'm not even sure I'm asking the question well. Maybe you can read my mind and figure out what I'm trying to ask you.
Are you asking how they work together?
Yeah, good.
To
That's
kind of
great.
So bees, the easiest way to describe it is they're basically one brain, and they communicate they know what's happening with every bee in that colony. And they to communicate where like the best patch of flowers are, they'll come in and one will fly and he'll do a dance and then he'll jiggle 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 and they'll be like, all right, we're going to go this way and then go to the left or go here and then go to the right. And so they have it. You'll see them if you look into a hive. You'll see one fly in and she'll be surrounded by a bunch of other bees and she'll be doing the dance, and then they'll all go to where she just said. And they'll just kind of communicate that like through vibrations all throughout the hive. And they each have different responsibilities. So then you have the bees that are the nurse bees that take care of the babies, and then you have the bees that are the worker bees that are building the comb, and then you'll have the bees that are the harvesters, will go out and pollinate and come back. And it's all based on age. And as they get older, those that go out and come back, those are usually the oldest ones. And so that means those would be the ones that die. And then you just kind of, the cycle just keeps going.
I love the way they all work together. We are hoping to plant a whole bunch of wildflowers right in front of the hive. And I hope will stay close to the hive when they're gathering pollen and not stray off into places where there's Roundup.
Yeah, I hope so too, especially with all the work going on over there.
What do you want to tell us that maybe we haven't covered so far?
Bees are a part of the cycle that we all need to be aware of, and how we fit into that cycle. Bees, you mentioned wildflowers, but bees actually pollinate more trees than they do flowers, probably because they're not disturbed as much. So trees are just as important as flowers and vegetables and bushes and all that to the pollinators. And it's actually, it's a really cool process when you get to really flow with it. And it's not just something you learn overnight. So it's going to be, we'll have some new lessons in the next couple of months with our peace bees for sure.
Well, I am so grateful to you for getting us started and for being such a wonderful educator about how all of this is happening. And I hope we have happy outcomes. I'm looking forward to that. And I'm also looking forward to the idea that we're doing good things for the earth as well by having bees.
Yes. Thank you for expanding the bee colony from Santa Fe to Spring Hill.
And maybe we'll go up to Franklin too and see what happens.
That's right.
So thanks again, Mandy, for being with us. We really appreciate your time today.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for having me.